Introduction. The year 2000, the beginning, humanity breathed a sigh of relief. The global computer apocalypse known as Y2K turned out to be a myth. The world did not collapse on January 1st. On the contrary, there was a feeling that we were standing on the threshold of something absolutely pure. The beginning of a new era, the beginning of the 2000s, a time when everything could start from zero. But behind the festive fireworks, a disturbing uncertainty was hidden. The old world was leaving, and the new one was only testing the ground. This year, the fates of countries that would define the face of the 21st century were being decided. How did the history of our nations begin in this millennium? Let's see how events unfolded in this new, unexplored reality. Chapter 1. Russia, a harsh entry into the new reality. December 31st, 1999. Just 12 hours before the start of the millennium, while the entire country was preparing holiday meals, Boris Yeltsin delivered a crushing blow to the political chessboard. "I am leaving." At that moment, his successor stepped onto the center stage, Vladimir Putin. A former KGB lieutenant colonel, former head of the FSB, a man with a cold gaze and the background of a career intelligence officer, who just yesterday was in the shadows, but today takes control of the nuclear briefcase of the world's largest country. For the West, it was a shock. Who is Mr. Putin? A question that did not leave the covers of Time and Newsweek in 2000. Russia began to rapidly shed its old skin. Political reset. The shift of eras. March 26, 2000. Putin seizes power in the first round of elections with a result of 52.94%, 39.7 million votes. May 7, 2000. The inauguration takes place in the St. Andrew's Hall of the Kremlin. For the first time in Russian history, power is transferred peacefully and according to a script. The new president immediately takes hold of the vertical of power. May 13th. He signs Decree number 849, dividing the country into 7 federal districts. Governors, who in the 90s were local princes, now line up to report to the Kremlin. Symbolism. At the end of the year, December 25th, a law is passed on the state anthem to the music of Alexandrov. The Soviet melody returns, sparking fierce debates in society, but solidifying the continuity of history and the return of the status of a great power. Economy on steroids. Figures and oil. In 2000, the Russian economy began to take off after a decade of degradation. Oil. The average price for Urals crude in 2000 rose to $28.5 per barrel, after a shameful $12 in 1998. This was a flood of petrodollars into the budget, which allowed the government to start paying off debts for pensions and salaries. Exchange rates. The dollar exchange rate at the beginning of the year was 27 rubles, and by December, it reached 28.16. Relative stability after the chaos of the default. GDP and salaries. For the first time in the years of independence, GDP growth was a phenomenal 10%. The average salary in the country was about 2,223 rubles, approximately $80. But purchasing power was growing. People began to buy their first household appliances and used foreign cars. The tragedy of the K-141, Kursk. 118 souls in the abyss. August 12, 2000. Exercises in the Barents Sea. An explosion in a torpedo tube turns the pride of the fleet, the nuclear submarine Kursk, 154 meters long, into a steel coffin at a depth of 108 meters. There were 24 Granite cruise missiles on board. The whole world followed the rescue operation. 118 sailors died. Putin remained on vacation in Sochi for the first few days of the tragedy, which caused fury in the media. The famous broadcast with Larry King on CNN. The question, "What happened to the submarine?" And Putin's short answer, "It sank." This phrase went down in history as a symbol of the new, pragmatic, and harsh policy. Cultural code. Brother 2 and the birth of a superhero. In May 2000, Alexei Balabanov's movie Brother 2 was released. It was not just a movie, it was a cultural manifesto. Danila Bagrov goes to Chicago to restore justice. The film's budget was $1.3 million, huge money for that time. The soundtrack, By Two, Spleen, Zemfira, became the anthem of a generation. The phrase, "Tell me, American, what is strength? I think that strength is in truth," hit the mark. Russia was searching for a new identity, different from Western standards. Ostankino and the Media Wars. August 27th. A fire at the Ostankino Tower. The fire raged at an altitude of 460 meters. 3 people died. For the first time in decades, Muscovites saw white noise on their television screens, a symbol of the end of the uncontrolled television of the 90s. In the same year, the attack on Vladimir Gusinsky's media empire, NTV, began. In June, he was arrested and jailed in Butyrka for 3 days. This was a signal to all oligarchs. The rules of the game had changed. The era when business dictated terms to the Kremlin was over.
Science, technology, and the military-industrial complex. November 2nd. Russia sends the first permanent crew to the ISS. The commander is the American Shepard. The pilots are the Russians Gidzenko and Krikalev. Space remains the only sphere where the RF and the USA still work as equal partners. Weapons. Arms exports in 2000 reached $3.68 billion. T-90S tanks and Su-30 fighters are actively exported to India and China. Russia returns to its status as a global arms baron. Medicine and tech. In 2000, the first unique operation for a liver transplant from a living-related donor to a child is performed in Russia. The first mass internet appears. The number of RuNet users reached 3.1 million people, a 50% increase in 1 year. The war in Chechnya. The active phase of the Second Chechen War. February 6th. Russian troops take full control of Grozny. The city is in ruins. February 29th to March 1st. The feat of the 6th Company in the Argonne Gorge. 90 paratroopers against nearly 2,500 militants. 84 soldiers died. This drama became part of the national code of the new Russia. Chapter 2. USA. The crash of illusions and the political knot. While Russia was building its new vertical, the United States of America entered the year 2000 as the planet's sole superpower. But it was this very year that became the crack in the foundation of American dominance. This was a story of a legal war for power, the collapse of virtual billions, and the first bloody warning from an enemy that America chose to ignore. The 2000 election. 36 days in legal hell. This was the largest and most scandalous legal battle for power in modern U.S. history. The country found itself on the brink of a constitutional crisis. The candidates: Vice President Al Gore, Democrat, and Texas Governor George W. Bush, Republican. November 7th, 2000. On election night, the leading TV channels first declared Gore the winner, then Bush, and then that the result was too close to call. The fate of the presidency depended on just 537 votes in Florida. Meat and chaos. A frantic manual recount began. The world learned the word chads. These are the small pieces of paper that didn't fully fall out of the punch card ballots. Lawyers with magnifying glasses in hand decided if a vote counted if the paper was still hanging by one corner. Democracy on pause. For 36 days, America lived without an elected president. Supporters of both parties took to the streets, accusing each other of stealing the election. The Supreme Court's verdict. On December 12, 2000, the U.S. Supreme Court, by a vote of 5-4, ordered the recount to stop. The victory was handed to Bush. Gore had won 543,895 more popular votes nationwide, but lost due to the Electoral College system. The system glitched, splitting American society forever. The dot-com crash, when the digital bubble burst. In the 90s, America believed that any internet company with a .com suffix would make you a millionaire. On March 10, 2000, the fairy tale ended. The NASDAQ collapse. The index of high-tech companies, after reaching an all-time peak of 5,048 points, went into a steep dive.
The market lost trillions of dollars in market value. Economic shock. Thousands of companies, such as Pets.com, went bankrupt in a matter of weeks. This was the end of the era of free money and the beginning of a long-lasting crisis of confidence in Silicon Valley. The attack on the USS Cole. A bloody prelude. A year before the fall of the Twin Towers, America received a terrifying warning in Yemen that it chose to ignore. October 12, 2000. In the port of Aden, Al-Qaeda suicide bombers in a boat packed with explosives rammed the side of the destroyer USS Cole. The meat. The explosion ripped a hole 12 by 12 meters in the hull. 17 American sailors were killed, and 39 were mutilated. It was a daring attack on a symbol of American power in the open sea. Osama bin Laden was already known by name, and intelligence was reporting preparations for new attacks, but no decisive response came from Washington. Deadly code. The I love you virus. In May 2000, the first digital pandemic hit the world. An ordinary student created a virus that brought the Pentagon, the CIA, and the Ford Motor Company to their knees. The scale. Within a few days, more than 45 million computers were infected. Damages amounted to about $10 billion. People opened an email with a love confession, and the virus instantly destroyed their photos and documents, then resent itself to everyone in their address book. This proved that a superpower was absolutely defenseless against a single line of computer code. Clinton's economic legacy. Bill Clinton was leaving office, leaving behind figures that seem like a fantasy to Americans today. The budget surplus. Budget revenues exceeded expenditures by a record $236 billion. Global share. The U.S. economy in 2000 accounted for nearly 31% of the world's GDP. This was the peak of American
Influence, a golden age, followed by a long and painful descent. Hollywood and technology. The start of the digital era. Gladiator, budget $103 million. Box office $460 million. Russell Crowe brought historical epics back into fashion and won an Oscar. X-Men, July 2000. The birth of the modern superhero movie universe. PlayStation 2. October 26, 2000. The console launch in the US. People stood in line for days. It was the ultimate tech fetish of the millennium. Science. Robots and genes. Fonts Sash. The map of life. On June 26, 2000, Bill Clinton officially announced the completion of the first draft of the human genome, 3.1 billion DNA base pairs. Robot surgeons. The FDA approved the Da Vinci system. For the first time in history, a robot became a full-fledged participant in the operating room, allowing doctors to perform procedures with micron-level precision from a console. Camp David and Vietnam, Verstauchists. In July, Clinton spent 15 days trying to reconcile Israel and Palestine at Camp David. The total failure of the negotiations eventually led to the start of the Second Intifada and a multi-year cycle of violence. In November, Clinton became the first U.S. president to visit Vietnam since the war ended in 1975, putting a symbolic end to a conflict that cost the lives of 58,000 American soldiers. Chapter 3. Ukraine. The point of the Great Rift. While the world powers celebrated the millennium, Ukraine entered the year 2000 at a dangerous crossroads. After the brutal 90s, the country was trying to find its footing. The first half of the year seemed like a time of hope and harsh stabilization, but this silence was only the lull before a massive storm that would forever change the political DNA of the nation. Economic breakthrough. The Yushchenko paradox was. The first half of 2000 became the moment when Ukraine's economy, for the first time in 9 years of independence, stopped falling. This was called an economic miracle. Exchange rates. At the beginning of the year, the dollar cost 5.05 hryvnias, and by summer it stabilized around 5.43 to 5.45 hryvnias. This was the stability people had been waiting for years. GDP. By the end of the year, Ukraine showed an incredible growth of 5.9%. This was a shock to experts after a decade of depression. Inflation. It stood at 25.8%. For that time, this was considered a victory and the taming of the beast. Viktor Yushchenko. Taking the prime minister's chair, he began cleaning out barter schemes. For the first time, pensions and teachers' salaries were paid in real money, not in pots or sugar. Yushchenko became a symbol of reform, laying the foundation for his future presidency. Political battle, the Velvet Revolution and the referendum, February and April 2000 were marked by Kuchma's struggle for absolute power. The Velvet Revolution in the Rada. On February 1st, the pro-presidential majority left the Rada building for the Ukrainian House to remove the leftist speaker, Tkachenko. Ukraine lived with two parliaments for several days until the right-wing forces took control. The all-Ukrainian referendum in April 2000, Kuchma initiated a popular vote. More than 80% voted to reduce the number of deputies from 450 to 300 and to create a bicameral parliament. Kuchma was moving towards strengthening his power, but the tape scandal later buried these plans. The disappearance of Georgy Gongadze, the death that woke a nation in September 16, 2000. This date became the point of no return. Opposition journalist and founder of Ukrainska Pravda, Georgy Gongadze, disappeared on his way home. The meat. The authorities lied, saying he was hiding somewhere. But on November 2nd, a headless body doused in acid was found in a forest near Tarascha. This was an execution that shocked the world. The country shuddered at the realization of the methods the government was using to fight dissent. The cassette scandal, a voice recorder under the president's sofa. If Gongadze's death was the spark, the recordings of Major Melnichenko were a nuclear explosion. November 28, 2000. Socialist leader Alexander Moroz played recordings in the Rada made on a voice recorder hidden under the sofa in Leonid Kuchma's office. The whole world heard voices similar to the president and his inner circle discussing how to get rid of Gongadze and hand him over to the Chechens. Ukraine saw the true face of the system. Trust in the government collapsed instantly. The end of the atomic era. The Chornobyl shutdown. December 15, 2000. This day became a historical milestone for the entire planet. Under immense pressure from the international community, Ukraine made the fateful decision to shut down the Chornobyl nuclear power plant forever. The final command. President Leonid Kuchma gave the order to turn the key on live television. The last operating Unit 3 went silent. The meat for the West, it was a victory for global safety. But for Ukraine, it was the loss of a massive energy hub and a personal tragedy for thousands of workers in Slavutich who lost their livelihoods. The atomic giant, which had brought so much pain and energy, was finally dead. The first Maidan. Ukraine without Kuchma. On that same day, December 15th, the first tents of protesters appeared on Maidan Nezalezhnosti. The slogan, Ukraine without Kuchma, marked the birth of real street resistance. It was the first step toward a civil society and the prototype for all future revolutions. Sports. A national hero in 2000, Andriy Shevchenko, playing for AC Milan, finally established himself as a global superstar. During those difficult months, his successes in the Champions League were the only reason for unconditional joy and pride for millions of Ukrainians. Conclusion. We are entering the noughties. The year 2000 became the foundation upon which the current realities of our history are built. It was a year when old systems were challenged by the cries of protests and the awakening of a nation. We saw how civil society in Ukraine began to breathe. This was only the beginning. We have officially entered the noughties, a decade where everything started with a clean slate, but with the heavy baggage of the past. If you enjoyed this detailed historical breakdown, give it a like and be sure to subscribe to the channel. Your support is what gives us the strength to dig deeper and create content of this scale. Ahead of us lies the year 2001, a time when the world will change finally and irrevocably. Stay with us. We will live through this history together.